was established? Anybody know where it's at? No? Tuskegee, Alabama. Very good. So on November 6, 1998, a law was established that made the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site in Tuskegee, Alabama. What president approved that legislation on November 6, 1998? That established that? President Bill Clinton. So on November 6, 1998, President Bill Clinton approved a law which established the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site in Tuskegee, Alabama. And it's simply a museum and interpretive center used to commemorate the heroic actions of the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. But it took us a while to get something up, didn't it? It's just kind of funny how it takes time to recognize these minorities such as Native Americans and black people. Okay, that'll take us to the atomic bomb and the end of World War II. Because what are we prepared for, Taylor, right now in the Pacific? What are we all over it? What are we ready to do? Attack Japan. So, you know, with the death of President Roosevelt, it's going to be the responsibility of President Harry S. Truman to decide on the course of action to take on the country of Japan. Okay, is he going to continue to plan and prepare a strike, an invasion of inland Japan? Or what's he going to do? Well, he consults with his advisors when he takes over the presidency. He consults with the military after these islands have been taken in the Pacific. And he made what will become an incredibly historic decision, if not one of the most historic decisions in the history of not only this country, but the world. Truman is going to authorize the use of the first atomic bomb on the country of Japan. So again, with the death of President Roosevelt, it now will be the responsibility of President Harry Truman to decide on a course of action to attack the country of Japan. He consults with his advisors in the military, and he makes a historic decision. He will authorize the use of the first atomic bomb, and it will be used on the country of Japan. Now, at the time of this decision, remember our next step, other than the use of atomic weapons, would be an all-out invasion of Japan. And at this time in the war, the Japanese army still totaled over 2.5 million. The Japanese army still totaled over 2.5 million people. Now let's think about this. These guys were willing to sacrifice their lives in defending islands in the Pacific. What do you think their philosophy is going to be in defending their homeland? Okay, 2.5 million Japanese soldiers are going to be more than willing to fight to the death to defend their homeland. So what Truman's advisors in the military did is they gave him an estimate of what would be the loss of American life if we invaded the mainland of Japan. That's what Truman was interested in. And Truman's advisors and his military men estimated that if the United States invaded Japan, we would see a loss of close to 1 million American soldiers. 1 million. Do you even get that? I'm going to take you guys to the Vietnam Wall, and you're going to see a sight that'll give you goosebumps of these names this long on this huge wall. That's 58,000 names. Can you imagine 1 million names, how big that wall would be? Think about that when you think about the decision that Truman made, if you're at all critical. So, with all of this in front of him, President Truman makes the only decision he feels he can make. He's going to drop the atomic bomb on Japan to try to save the lives of 1 million American soldiers. That's his thought. Well, on August 6th of 1945, August 6th of 1945, President Truman ordered a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay to drop an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. On August 6, 1945, President Truman ordered a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay to drop an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. August 6, 1945, President Truman authorizes and orders a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay to drop an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. When that bomb dropped and landed, it destroyed 80% of the buildings that were standing and killed approximately 100,000 people, most instantly. So when that bomb landed on Hiroshima, it destroyed 80% of the buildings that were standing, devastated them, and approximately 100,000 people were killed. Many were killed instantly. What happened 16 hours later? Truman called upon the Japanese government to what? Surrender. They did not respond. So 16 hours later, President Truman called upon the Japanese government to surrender. They did not respond. As a result of the non-response, 2 days later on August 8, 1945, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. As a result of the Japanese government not responding to Truman's call for surrender, 2 days later on August 8, 1945, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. That bomb killed 35,000 more people, most instantly. Finally, after the devastation and loss of life and the 2 atomic bomb droppings, the Japanese surrendered, ending World War II. The official date was August 10th, 1945. That's when the Japanese government asked for peace. On August 10th, 1945, the Japanese government asked for peace.
How many people died in this at home?
Approximately 35,000. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
It was the factories.
Well, that was part of it. To save lives such, but I don't think it matters what 2 cities. I mean,
But they didn't want to drop it on like Tokyo or
Right.
something big.
because of the loss of life.
Yeah.
So you pick your battles. You know, I'll kind of stop there a little bit of explanation. You know, being the President of the United States is not an easy thing. We talked about this before. So when you are, as Courtney said, when you are in a war, even this day, and you choose to take out a factory because that's something that's producing things that are harmful to our effort, and the President makes that decision that we're going to take out that factory, we talked about this before, there's probably a custodian working there, cleaning the bathrooms, because that's his job. And the President knows that there are people working in that building that are going to be casualties of war that have nothing related to it. But that's the decisions that have to be made. It's a tough decision. Well, 4 days later, on August 14th, 1945, Truman announced by radio to the American people that Japan had accepted the Allied surrender terms. 4 days later, 4 days after the Japanese government asked for peace, on August 14th, 1945, President Truman announced by radio that Japan had accepted the Allied surrender terms. That day in history becomes known as what? VJ Day, Victory in Japan, or over Japan. So August 14th, 1945 becomes known in American history as VJ Day. Well, on September 2nd, 1945, the formal surrender by Japan occurred. On September 2nd, 1945. And you have a picture of this. When I gave you the picture showing you General Jonathan Wainwright and how skinny he was after he was rescued in the Philippines. The formal surrender by Japan to the Allies on that date was conducted on the deck of the American battleship, the USS Missouri. So on September 2nd, 1945, the formal surrender by Japan to the Allies was conducted on the deck of the American battleship, the USS Missouri. The greatest war in world history had finally come to an end. Okay? I'm going to read something to you today, the last few minutes. So I just want you to put your pencils down and just kind of listen. The Region Elementary book.
Yeah.
Oh, just, yeah, you just, I just want you to, don't want you to write, I just want you to listen.
Wait, what about cost of the
Oh.
Lord?
What's that?
Cost of the
We'll finish that tomorrow. Here's a book I became familiar with on my second or third year of teaching. It's a simple book, it's called Shin's Tricycle. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. Every August I am haunted by the same memory. In my mind I see my son, Shin, riding the red tricycle that he dreamed of getting for his birthday. But this happy picture disappears behind a cloud of smoke and ash. A darkness falls on my heart when I think of the one day in August that brought all of our dreams to an end. 50 years ago, when Shin was 3, our family lived in a small house near a quiet river that flowed through Hiroshima, Japan. Shin had 2 sisters, Makiko and Yoko, but his best friend was Kimi, the girl who lived next door. Each day they played house and looked at picture books, especially that one that showed the tricycle that Shin wanted so badly, even though it was an impossible dream. Here's Shin and Kimi, dreaming about the red tricycle. There weren't any tricycles anywhere in Japan. In 1941, Japan had attacked America and many other countries. And after 4 years of war, bicycles, temple bells, even pots and pans were melted down to build tanks and cannons. There were no new toys anywhere. But Shin wanted a bike so much that one day he wouldn't eat anything. He pleaded to me, "Papa, you'll buy me a tricycle, won't you? Please, Papa, please." His mother lightly touched his shoulder and said, "We're sorry, Shin. You'll just have to learn to be patient. We all have to live without things we want right now." Shin was heartbroken, but he knew his mother was right. So there's Shin. He is really upset because he doesn't have a chance to have a tricycle. Then one day, Shin's uncle, a sailor in the Japanese Navy, came to visit. "Shin," he called, "come here. I have something for you." "What is it?" Shin asked with excitement, as he stared wide-eyed at the huge package in his uncle's arms. "Take a guess," his uncle said. "It's something you really, really want." With that, his uncle hid the gift behind him. Shin was so excited he jumped around to reach the package. But his uncle, laughing all the while, kept the mystery gift hidden. Just then, Shin saw a little red handle poking through the wrapping. "It's a tricycle," Shin shrieked, not believing what he saw. But as he tore away the rest of the wrapping, his eyes filled with tears. "Oh, thank you, Uncle. Thank you so much. Where did you get it?" "I found it hidden in the back of my closet," his uncle said. "I'm shipping out before your birthday, so I wanted to give it to you now." Quickly, Shin jumped on the bike and looked proudly at me. "Look, Papa, my dream came true." The morning of August 6, 1945 was a beautiful one. The air was filled with the sandpapery sounds of crickets crimping their legs together in the nearby trees. But the quiet of the morning was broken by another air raid siren warning of an American bomb attack. When the siren stopped, Shin and Kimi ran into the backyard, giggling as they jumped on the tricycle and rode around the yard. A group of soldiers repairing the road in front of our house laughed as they watched the red tricycle speed by with Shin and Kimi beaming like lanterns. I too was laughing as I went back into our house to get ready for work. And then the unthinkable happened. Now, you know, they're hearing these sirens all the time. And sometimes if you hear so many sirens, you just kind of see them as normal. They're expecting such a thing. An explosion so terrible, a flash so blindly bright, I thought the world had just ended. Then, just as quickly, everything went black. When I woke up, darkness surrounded me and I couldn't move. I was trapped, but where? Then I saw a faint light coming through a small hole above me. I began to move my hands, carefully feeling the big wooden beams that were holding me down. I reached up and touched something smooth. It was the ceiling of our house. The whole house had collapsed on top of me. Slowly I crawled toward the light and onto the roof. I stood looking into a hot black wind. I couldn't believe my eyes. Nothing was left. No Kimmy's house, no temple, no people, no Hiroshima. I cried into the wind, "Is anyone there? Help!" I heard Mother scream, "Help me!" I stumbled over our fallen house and found Mother digging in the rubble. There was Shin, pinned under a big beam. Quickly I lifted the beam while Mother gently pulled Shin out. His face was bleeding and swollen. He was too weak to talk, but his hand still held the red handlebar grip from his tricycle. Kimmy was gone, lost somewhere under the house. Then I spotted the edges of two little dresses trapped beneath the roof. Behind them, a wall of fire raced towards our house. "Makiko, Yoko," I screamed, "I'm coming." With all my strength, I tried to lift the roof beams, but I couldn't. The fire was very close now and suddenly was so hot I feared my clothes would start burning. Suddenly the beam was on top of my two girls, burst into flames. I cried in horror. I was so helpless to save my girls. There was nothing I could do. But Shin still had a chance, so Mother and I rushed him away from the raging fire to the river. The survivors all gathered on the riverbank. It was a horrible sight. Everyone was burned and they were crying, moaning, or screaming for water. So everybody ran to the river. "Water, I want water," pleaded Shin in a faint voice. I wanted to help him so much, but all around people were dying when they drank the water, so I didn't dare give it to him. "Papa," Shin whispered so quietly I could barely hear him. Try." I squeezed his hand that still held the plastic grip. "Shin," I said, "you still have the handle in your hand." His swollen face seemed to brighten, and a little smile peeked through. For that night, he died 10 days before his 4th birthday. The next day I went back to our house. There I found the little bones of my daughters lying together. I burst into tears. "I'm sorry, my loves, please forgive me." After I buried them, I cried for a long time, remembering how happy they had been just the day before. The next evening I dug a grave in our backyard for Shin, but before I buried him, Kimmy's mother arrived carrying Kimmy's body. "They were such good friends," she said sadly, "we should bury them together." So Kimmy and Shin were buried together holding hands, along with Shin's treasured tricycle, which we had found in the rubble. Every evening after that, we stood by the river and cried out our children's names. "40 years passed after the atomic bomb turned Hiroshima into a desert, and there was new life all around the city. People had worried that nothing would ever grow again, but trees and grass sprouted everywhere. Children laughed and played in the parks. I remembered the smiles of my own children, and my heart still ached with the memory. For many years, Mother and I had been comforted by knowing our children were so close by, but we had always intended to give the children a proper burial in a cemetery. One day we decided the time had come to move them. We began digging in the backyard, and Kim's mother joined us. After a few minutes of digging, I hit something metal. I looked closely and saw a rusty pipe sticking through the dirt. "Look, Mother, it's the tricycle. I had forgotten it was there." Before I knew it, I was crying. I had to turn away. I just couldn't look at it. "Look, Papa, there's something white," Mother said. We all stared at the little white bones of Kimmy and Shin, hand in hand, as we had placed them. Wars are always brutal. No matter who starts one, innocent people die, even children like Shin. With tears in my eyes, I gently lifted Shin's tricycle. "This should never again happen to children," I said. "Maybe if people could see Shin's tricycle, they would remember that the world should be a peaceful place where children can play and laugh." The next day I took the tricycle to the Peace Museum in Hiroshima. Now Shin's story helps others dream of peace alive for children around the world. That is a true story. Here's a picture here of Shin, Kimmy, and here's the tricycle that was dug up and put in the museum at Hiroshima. So this story I read you, which seemed maybe a little bit childrenish, is actually a true story of what happened. And the point in reading it is President Truman had to make a tough decision. And by saving 1 million American lives, this is kind of the aftermath of what happened. It's a very good word. So keep that in mind. Although it was a devastating thing for the people of Japan, Truman's decision was a necessity to save American lives. Let me tell you a quick story. Yesterday, I went over to France and Safety, and I took Fred Franson the video of the unknown flag raiser at Iwo Jima, because he's a hardcore Marine. And we talked, and he told me yesterday that his father was scheduled to be on the first wave of invasion into Japan if they chose to invade the homeland. And he said, obviously, without Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb, which resulted in deaths like Shin, he would not be here today, nor would his children, nor would any semblance of him forever and ever and ever. He's one of 1 million people that would have been affected by that. So if you hear decisions on Harry Truman and why he did that, hopefully you have a little better understanding of what the decision process was. Okay, tomorrow we will talk about the costs of the war, which is a very short subtopic. Then we're going to go ahead and give you your review, and then we'll decide kind of where we want to go the rest of the week, because I know there's several of you that are going to be gone Thursday. Okay, so we'll talk about that and kind of go from there. Okay, good job today. We'll finish up tomorrow.